So next up we've got Aaron, whose slides seem to come up, that's great. And going to be talking about attribute-based permissions and arches. So I'll let you take it away. I'll give you 20 minutes.
All right, thanks so much. Hello, my name is Aaron Gundel. I'm a software engineer at Farallon Geographics. I've been there for about 4 years now, mostly working on arches and infrastructure around arches. And so this talk today is going to be about attribute-based access control within arches. So why this talk right now, and kind of set the table a little bit. This talk came about in large part because of the needs of one of our clients. They needed deny permissions, so that there would not be you wouldn't have access to all of the resources within Arches at the same time, and the deny permissions that we currently have in 7.6 didn't quite measure up to their needs, and so we wanted to build off of the existing permissions framework that we have in 7.6. And we needed something simple. We didn't have a need for any kind of permission inheritance or anything like that. So this talk is going to exclude topics like that. And we didn't have a need for node group permissions. So that's also outside of the scope of this talk. And for performance reasons, we wanted to use Django query sets. So that is something that's a part of this talk, but I'm not going to touch on directly. That will be touched on later. All right, so to set the table a little more about the current state of permissions today within Arches, we have a set of permission frameworks within Arches right now. These came about in large part because of the 2024 developer conference and the work of Phil over here. So thank you, Phil. Without that work, this would not be a thing today. So prior to that, everything was hard-coded into the back end of Arches, and there was really no kind of extensibility on these permissions, so you couldn't do very much. Right now, the permissions frameworks that we have are built off of Django Guardian. Django Guardian is a Django app that provides per object permissions, which is something that we Django doesn't give you out of the box. And it's the permission frameworks that we have implement and override methods to determine principal access. So whether that be a user or a group. We have two flavors of permission frameworks within core right now. Default allow, which has been the default behavior since forever, which is basically everyone has access to all of your resources all the time. And in 7.6, we also introduced default deny, which is no one has access to any resources unless you add permissions for them. And so, moving on a little bit. So, permissions are pretty freeform. You can do whatever you want with them. You can manage them however you want. But this can be quite chaotic, especially if you've got a lot of resources. So there are some methods for controlling that chaos. One of those is role-based access control, where a role is something that's tied to a user's function, often their job function. An example would be like a software developer or a curator at a museum. And so once we know a role, we can assign permissions to that role. This is typically done with groups in Arches. All users with that role have the same permissions. And so you can use RBAC with either default deny or default allow. And so if users are in a particular role with default deny, you have to give them access. And if they're in it with default allow, you have to deny them access. So we ran into some problems that have actually stretched that. First of which being Guardian support. When we started working on this project, support was pretty spotty. They just had a new maintainer come on board as of October 2024. So things are improving a bit there since then, and I know that a release is forthcoming, but it was pretty spotty there for a while. Also, default allow, I mean, by default has too much access. There's been some talk of shifting over to default deny for 8x, but that's not finalized by any means at this point. So default allow doesn't adhere to the principle of least privilege, though, and that's just saying that only people who have a need for a thing should get access to the thing. So uh, allow and deny both can lead to permission bloat. So how that looks math-wise is for the number of let's see, we've got one record per mapping. So we map one principal to one permission. So that means like a principal would be like a group, and a permission would be like read or write or something like that. And so if you don't have a lot of resources, then this is fine. But if you start getting a lot of resources, and I know some of the talks here have already talked about that, and there are systems that we've managed with upwards of 12 million records. So if you have one group with read, one group with read write, and a million resources, then you're talking about 3 million Django Guardian records. And if you want to add another group with read, write, and delete, you're talking about 6 million total records, and that can lead to some slow querying. So, so to try and combat that particular issue, we introduced the concept of default permissions when we rolled out the permission frameworks in 7.6. And so it applies for well-known cases. So you can assign permissions for all resource instances of a given graph type to a particular user or group. And we don't consult Guardian in that. We kind of short circuit the whole Guardian workflow. This was very useful at the time, but it's not very flexible. You can't be more specific than the resource type or the graph, and you often have to go manual if you want to add a bunch of exceptions or anything like that. And so you end up getting different kinds of bloat. So the other issue that you have, especially if you're using role-based access control, is role explosions. So RBAC, it's pretty easy at first, but when you start adding more roles, things can get complicated pretty quickly. An example of that might be like with project management. If you have like a project developer, a project administrator, and a project editor in one project, say you want to add another project with the same or different roles, then you start having this multiplicative effect on the number of records that you get in Guardian and in general. So, and this is actually a path to risk. So you have forgotten roles, forgotten groups, and users leave roles. Their roles change. They leave your company, and it can produce some security holes. And so for all these reasons and more, we came up with attribute-based access control, which is technically a rule-based permission framework that allows for attribute-based access control. And so in this framework, you have a rule that defines who has access to what based on resource or tile attributes. And so this, by default, inherits from deny. So we deny access by default here, and only a rule match grants access to resources. So we actually short circuit Guardian here again completely. We don't consult Guardian at all when we're doing this. So. And so what's in a rule? What makes up a rule? The most important part is a filter. And so that's just a function that we have on the back end. And that function is what's used to actually determine whether access is allowed. Incoming into that function is a value, which is just a freeform JSON value that is used by the filter to determine whether or not the rule succeeds or not. And so there's also resource operations, which is allowed an array of allowed operations or permissions in the event of a match. For instance, read, write, or delete. And so we'll take a look at a rule real quick here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the schema that we're using here. So rules, this is the table of existing rules that we have right now. So we have the filter here, and whether that rule is active, we have a description of the rule, and the value, like I said, which is just a free-form JSON value, which is going to be used by the filter, and a list of actions that are going to be applied if the rule succeeds. These two, node ID and node group, are going to go away and probably be folded into value at some point. We also have rule config groups, which is just basically a mapping of rules to groups. So saying who this rule applies to. And so right now we have a few different types of filters. The most obvious one is a tile value filter. So it consults the value of a given node in a particular tile to determine access. We have a lifecycle state filter. So lifecycle being a new V8 feature, you can filter based on the current state of a resource, whether it's active, retired, in draft, etc. And finally, we have a spatial filter. You can filter based on a static GeoJSON blob or a specific or a resource with an actual geometry tied to it. And I'm going to do a live demo because I like to live dangerously. All right, so I'll pull this up here, search, just to reassure you that I've got nothing up my sleeve here. This particular user that's signed in right now is the tester1 user, so it has access to nothing except this geometry which it created. It's the principal for that particular user, so principals have access. This other window that I have signed in here is the admin user, so it can see all 2,500 records in this particular instance. So there is definitely a difference here. This will load someday. There we go. All right, and so I'm going to turn on one of these rules here to get this thing started. I will turn on anything that has a numeric match of 75. Save it. Right now, one of the unfortunate drawbacks that we have that'll be worked out at some point here is that I actually have to restart my server every time I change the rules, but shouldn't be a permanent thing. Now you can see I have more resources available to me, and if I go into one of these, number 75 is one of them that's here. So we also support with this particular release chaining. So you can chain rules together and get an ORed set of resources. So if we wanted to, for instance, allow tiles with concept of RNB, save this, restart the server. That's not going to help. And now we've got 826 records as part of this. So if we go into one of these, we should see concept value of RNB. So let's see. And the last thing I'll demonstrate a couple more of these rules here. Just turning things off and on. I'll turn on a spatial filter. And just to demonstrate the value that we're checking against here, we have a The particularly relevant piece here is this GeoJSON polygon that we're going to compare against. So let's save that. All right, I'll turn on the overlay. And this is the, we have a subset of resources here. If I jump over to admin, you'll see that our actual admin user has access to a lot more geometries. So we're only comparing against that GeoJSON subset up here. And we also can go back over here and change that. And if the resource instance ID is present in here, it's used instead of the GeoJSON. So I'll change that and save off here. Restart that. Okay, restarted it. Yeah. All right. And that is the geometry for the test geom resource that you saw originally at the beginning of this. And we also have a rule to test life cycles. And so this particular rule is only testing against things that have an active life cycle. So if we jump in here, you can't actually see the current state of it, but if we jump into admin, these are a little more obvious. So this is in an active state versus a draft or retired state. So, yeah. So back to slides. So what's next here? We need obviously a UI for our rules. That seems like the low-hanging fruit right now. We also are looking to add extensible filtering. So right now the filters are all pretty much hard-coded, but we have a vision that in the future those would not be, and you'd be able to put them in whatever app you want to put them in. So we need more operations for the chained rules. Right now we only support OR, but in the future we can imagine putting AND or XOR or something like that in there. It goes right along with having a better UI for this. And also extensions for node group permissions, which we haven't really put much thought into right now. So. And we do need to add some performance improvements for better tile filtering. Right now you can do this for large sets of tiles, but you do have to add additional JSON level indexes on those tiles. So. And that's about it. So yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Sharon. So, where do we want to start? I've got some questions, but I'm not going to abuse my privilege of standing up here to do that. So, I don't know if you would like to kick off. Owen?
So I know you said you were planning on making a UI for those rules, but I'm just wondering what it looks like whenever you send to the endpoint to set these rules. Like, would it look similar to the Elasticsearch queries? If not, I think that might be a good idea because permissions that we use could just be changing a key.
I'm not sure I entirely follow your question.
Like, so with Elasticsearch, you end up sending a JSON up, and it'll have a node, it's an and, it does this condition, that condition, and then you'll have another group, and it'll say it's an or it's an and, it affects this node, etc., etc.
Right.
It's just because we're using something similar, so if we wanted to keep, maybe for a different project, we're using a different, but what does it look like at the moment is basically what I'm asking.
I mean, we haven't really thought that far ahead at this point. We've mostly been focused on the database level, just modification of the rules, because like right now, there wasn't a need in this particular project for us to do a lot of dynamic changes to those rules. So certainly open for interpretation on what that UI would look like in the future. So
cool. Yeah, just the hours is handy because it looks just like the filter strings. If you've seen them in any of the search things,
yeah.
It just means, yeah. Cool.
That's great. Where's this function on?
Yeah, it's a thing there.
So there is it in core now, or is it?
It's not in core.
It's
No.
not in
This
core.
isn't a separate application. I
Okay.
went away there, but
And
there
so
you go.
it didn't hit version 8 then?
Yeah.
Okay. Ah, sure. Cool.
So yeah, you can pull it down and play with it today. It should just.
Is the idea that it'll be in core? Is it going to be like an installable app?
Right now, we're just targeting an installable app.
Cool. Great. That's something else, but I forgot.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
This was really fascinating, and I can see in provenance we have many use cases where you've got editors with different permissions, and they can access or update part of the resources within a particular, for a particular model. And not just part of the resources, but within the resource as well, parts of the graph. So can this be leveraged to also have rules per, nodes, node groups?
That's something that's on our roadmap in the future, but right now, it's just resource level.
But the rules would be flexible to even secure the resources as we wish, like, define
Yeah,
the rules.
the idea is that you could write your own rules, write your own filters, and yeah.
Okay, looking forward to it.
I do have a follow-up. So I guess as a number of people know, we've got, and thank you for name checking as well. We've got some work on the possibly a different part of this problem, and it might be that I think definitely I'd be interested in seeing how we could potentially look at combining what we're doing in some way, if that gives some of the UI stuff and some of the hierarchical stuff and things like that, because I think what we also want to do is start leveraging things like query sets, which we don't have. But I don't just don't want to put you on the spot, but I guess there's a general question. Do you think that that the pathway is more likely to be different levels of complexity as different applications, or would you see something that has configurable complexity as part of core or part of one or two applications?
I could see it being pretty configurable,
Yeah.
right now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It'd be good to have a follow-up conversation then.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well,
I'll
thank
let
you.
Pitch it for Wednesday if you don't. Good, thank you very much, Arthur. That was really good.